Cyber Threat Brief for June 20th, 2026. CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, orders federal agencies to patch Splunk Enterprise by Sunday as active exploitation confirmed. 40 Bleed campaign hits 86,000 Fortinet devices with verified credentials as Russian threat actors run 1.16 billion password attempts. Dragon Force ransomware abuses Microsoft Teams turn relays to hide command and control traffic behind trusted infrastructure. Here's the full breakdown of today's top security stories. Daily Cybersecurity Threat Brief June 20, 2026. Next section, Critical Alerts. CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, Splunk Enterprise flaw actively exploited. Patch by Sunday. CVE 2026-20253. CISA added CVE 2026-20253 to the known exploited vulnerabilities catalog and ordered federal agencies to patch by June 21. The critical flaw affects Splunk Enterprise versions 10.2.0 to 10.2.3 and 10.0.0 to 10.0.6, allowing unauthenticated remote attackers to create or truncate arbitrary files via a PostgreSQL sidecar service endpoint with no authentication. Watchtower published proof-of-concept exploit code on June 12, and Splunk confirmed limited in the wild exploitation on June 18. Shadowserver tracks over 1,400 internet-exposed Splunk instances, with most in North America and Europe. The vulnerability carries an EPSS, the Exploit Prediction Scoring System, score of 0, 195th percentile, indicating high likelihood of exploitation. Action: upgrade to Splunk Enterprise 10.2.4 or 10.0.7 by June 21. If patching is not immediately possible, disable the PostgreSQL sidecar service to remove the attack surface, but note this will break edge processor, op-amp, and SBL2 data pipelines. Monitor for requests to the PostgreSQL sidecar endpoint in logs and verify no unauthorized file modifications have occurred. Sources: Bleeping Computer. 40 Bleed, 86,000 Fortinet device credentials, compromised Russian-speaking threat actors, compiled a verified database of 86,644 working administrative and VPN credentials for FortiGate firewalls across 194 countries. The campaign combined 1.16 billion credential attempts against 320,000 FortiGate targets and 2.1 billion attempts against 163,000 MS-SQL servers. Threat actors exploited legacy SHA-256 credential hashing in older Fort iOS versions and extracted credentials from configuration files, then used a 45 GPU cluster managed through Hashtopolis for offline cracking. The campaign is self-sustaining. Attackers spray known passwords, intercept SSL VPN traffic on compromised devices to harvest additional credentials, and add verified logins back to their attack database. Generic admin accounts, 35%, and built-in Fortinet system accounts, 28.3%, comprise most compromised credentials, indicating widespread failure to rename default accounts or rotate factory credentials. Confirmed targets include government entities, critical infrastructure providers, and a Turkish NATO defense contractor from which classified documents were exfiltrated. Action: terminate all active SSL VPN and administrative sessions immediately. Reset all Fortinet VPN and administrative passwords, prioritizing internet-facing systems. Verify Fort iOS 7.2.11, 7.4.8, or 7.6.1+ is installed to enable PBKDF2-based password hashing. Force administrator password resets to trigger conversion from legacy SHA-256 hashes to PBKDF2. Enable phishing-resistant multi-factor authentication. Audit logs for successful logins shortly after large-volume password failure events. Use Hudson Rock's free 40 Bleed lookup tool to check domain exposure. Sources: Security Week, The Hacker News Recorded Future. Next section, Ransomware and Extortion. The Gentleman RA-S uses Gentle Killer EDR framework, targeting 400 security processes. The Gentleman Ransomware as a Service operation maintains a mature portfolio of EDR killers centered around the Gentle Killer framework, with 8 variants targeting 400 processes from 48 security vendors. Asset reports the group can operationalize newly disclosed Bring Your Own Vulnerable Driver, BYOVD, proof of concepts within days of public release. Each Gentle Killer variant mimics a different legitimate security product: Kaspersky, Faceit Anti-Cheat, Valorant, Javelin, Watchdog, Network Blocker, Cleaner, G11, and abuses a different vulnerable driver for EDR termination. The group also incorporates third-party tools including Hexkiller, Google API Util 64, SIS, previously exclusive to Warlock Ransomware, Throttle Blood, used by Medusa Locker and Dragon Force affiliates, and Havoc Killer, Havoc. SIS. All tools share standardized defense evasion layers with fake version information, copied legitimate certificates, icons, and binary protection using Enigma or Themata. The gentleman has claimed 504 victims since March 2025, primarily in Southeast Asia, South America, and Western Europe, and is led by Russian national Alexander Andreevich Yapiev. Action: monitor for processes impersonating security vendor executables with mismatched digital signatures. Implement behavioral detection for BYOVD attacks using known vulnerable drivers EB, SIS and Seconal, SIS Game Driver X64, SIS STPM Old, SIS STPM New, SIS DMX, SIS 360 Netman WFP, SIS IMF Force Delete, SIS Poison X, SIS HRWFP DRV, SIS Google API Util 64, SIS Throttle Blood, SIS Havoc SIS. Block loading of vulnerable drivers at the kernel level. Alert on security process termination patterns and investigate any EDR service failures. Source: The Hacker News. Dragon Force abuses Microsoft Teams relays to conceal backdoor traffic. Dragon Force ransomware operators deployed a custom Go-based backdoor called Backdoor Turn that conceals command and control traffic within legitimate Microsoft Teams relay infrastructure. Researchers observed an attack on a major U.S. services company where Dragon Force obtained an anonymous Teams visitor token backed by Skype Identity Services, then leveraged Microsoft's traversal using relays around NAT Turn protocol to establish a quick session with the attacker's command and control server. Network defenders only observed outbound traffic to trusted Microsoft servers, allowing attackers to remain undetected for up to 2 months. Intrusion began in December 2025 via SQL or MS SQL server exploitation, followed by PowerShell delivery of a fake technical support hotfix ZIP containing DLL, dynamic link library, side-loading sequences. Attackers employed BYOVD techniques with a Huawei audio driver and a Bissworker payload masquerading as Palo Alto software to achieve kernel-level privileges and terminate security tools. This marks the first documented in the wild abuse of Microsoft Teams turn relays for C2 communications. Action: monitor for anonymous Teams visitor token generation in Microsoft 365 logs. Inspect quick protocol traffic to Microsoft Teams relay servers for unusually long duration sessions or high data volumes. Review SQL and MS SQL servers for signs of compromise from December 2025 forward. Block DLL side-loading attempts and alert on Huawei driver installation. Investigate any security tool terminations coinciding with network connections to Microsoft Teams infrastructure. Source: Sentinel-1. Clue OAuth breach victim list grows as Icarus hackers claim attack market intelligence platform Clue confirmed a security incident on June 12, where attackers gained access through a compromised legacy credential associated with an integration service, then obtained OAuth tokens to connect Clue with Salesforce and other third-party platforms. Attackers use stolen OAuth credentials to access customer Salesforce environments and conduct large-scale data theft via Python scripts querying Salesforce's API for extended periods. The Ransomware Extortion operation publicly claimed responsibility and threatened to leak stolen data unless victims contact them via session messaging platform. Affected organizations include Huntress, Recorded Future, Tanium, Jamf, Sprout Social, Gong, and Insurity. Clue revoked affected credentials and tokens, removed unauthorized code, disabled impacted integrations, and engaged CrowdStrike for incident response. Most victims report the incident was limited to Salesforce data exfiltration, with no impact to their own platforms, infrastructure, payment information, or internal systems. Action: if your organization uses Clue Battlecards integrations with Salesforce, review Salesforce audit logs for suspicious OAuth token generation and API query patterns from June 12 onward. Rotate any OAuth tokens associated with third-party integrations. Monitor for extortion emails from Session Messenger ID linked to the Icarus group. Alert employees that stolen business contact information may be used in follow-on phishing and social engineering campaigns. Source: Bleeping Computer. Next section: Business and Infrastructure Threats. Threat Brief: Mitigating Large-Scale Credential Attacks. 40 Bleed Unit 42 warns of a large-scale password spraying and credential theft campaign targeting Fortinet devices, with reports of MS SQL and Sophos devices also affected. Threat actors use a curated password list developed through previous breaches and vulnerability exploitation to conduct internet-wide scanning and password spraying. Once credentials are obtained, attackers exploit privilege escalation vulnerabilities to extract device configuration files containing stored credentials, perform offline password cracking to add to their attack list, and establish persistent administrator access. An initial access broker on Russian-language forum exploit and claimed responsibility and offered harvested credentials for sale on June 16, 2026. SOC Radar provided initial reporting on FortiGate targeting. Action: audit remote access logs for successful logins shortly after large volume password failure events. Require multi-factor authentication for all remote services. Adopt Zero Trust Network Access (ZTNA) policies to prevent management interfaces from being exposed directly to the public internet. Change default account credentials and disable unused accounts. Ensure latest software versions and patches are installed to mitigate privilege escalation vulnerabilities. For PANOS customers, verify SHA-256 encrypted and salted password hashes are in use and MFA, multi-factor authentication, is integrated. Source: Unit 42. Crypto Bandits malware doubles as a backdoor. Abuses Tor. Microsoft warns of a Windows cryptocurrency, Clipper Active, since February 2026 that establishes a lightweight backdoor with data exfiltration and remote code execution capabilities. Crypto Bandits deploys a portable Tor client on infected systems and routes traffic through a local SOC 5 proxy to poll a hidden service C2 server every 500 milliseconds. The malware is distributed through malicious shortcut, LNK, payloads, and deploys two components: a worm for USB propagation and a Clipper/Stealer for cryptocurrency wallet theft. The Clipper uses Windows script host and ActiveX-driven logic, checks whether Task Manager is running as an anti-analysis defense, and achieves persistence through scheduled tasks. It can extract seed phrases and private keys from cryptocurrency wallets and replace cryptocurrency addresses in the clipboard with attacker-controlled addresses to hijack transactions. The malware employs multi-layered obfuscation, decrypts all components at runtime, and uses the Tor client to route communication over localhost 9050 to hide C2 location. Action: harden script execution paths by restricting Windows script host via group policy. Monitor for local SOC 5 proxy abuse on port 9050 and Tor process execution, renamed binaries mimicking legitimate applications. Alert on scheduled task creation that references script files in user profile directories. Use behavioral hunting to correlate script activity with clipboard monitoring, screenshot capture, network connections to localhost 9050, and USB device enumeration. Block cryptocurrency wallet address clipboard substitution by monitoring clipboard access patterns from script-based processes. Source: Security Week. Operation Endgame disrupts SOC Gaulish servers, cleans 14,971 WordPress sites. Law enforcement from the Netherlands, Canada, Germany, and the U.S. disrupted 106 servers linked to SOC Gaulish malware and cleaned infections from 14,971 WordPress websites as part of Operation Endgame, an international initiative targeting botnets associated with Russian cybercrime syndicate Evil Corp. SOC Gaulish is a JavaScript-based downloader active since 2017 that hijacks legitimate websites to deceive visitors into installing malicious payloads disguised as browser updates. Upon installation, the malware establishes remote access, enabling threat actors to deploy secondary malware and ransomware families including Lockbit, RansomHub, Drydex, and Raspberry Robin. SOC Gaulish operators Gold Prelude, Mustard Tempest, Purple Valhund, TA 569, UNC 1543 have been observed delivering loaders like GaLoader and MinceLoader, which deploy Ghostweaver, Async RAT, and Net Support RAT. Authorities notified affected website owners to update CMS, change credentials, delete suspicious accounts, and implement multi-factor authentication. Action: if you manage WordPress websites, verify your site is not on the list of clean sites. Update WordPress core, themes, and plugins to latest versions. Change all administrative credentials and delete any unauthorized accounts. Enable multi-factor authentication for all WordPress admin accounts. Audit websites for JavaScript injections, particularly those loading from external domains or mimicking browser update prompts. Monitor web server access logs for SOC Gaulish indicators. Source: The Hacker News. Hackers exploit info disclosure bug in Gravity SMTP WordPress plugin, CVE 2026-4020. Threat actors are actively exploiting an unauthenticated information disclosure vulnerability in Gravity SMTP WordPress plugin, active on 100,000 sites. CVE 2026-4020 affects all versions from 2.1.4 and older, and was fixed in version 2.1.5, released March 17. The flaw stems from an exposed REST API endpoint whose permission callback always returns true, allowing unauthenticated GET requests to receive a comprehensive JSON system report containing API keys, secrets, OAuth tokens for email integrations, Amazon SES, Google, Mailjet, Resend, Zoho. WordPress configuration details, server and PHP environment information, and database configuration. WordFence blocked over 17 million exploit attempts against protected customers, with exploitation activity spiking to 4 million requests on June 7. Action: upgrade Gravity SMTP plugin to version 2.1.5 immediately. Block requests to /wp-json/gravitism/v1/tests/mock data in web application firewall rules, particularly those including the page equals gravitism settings query parameter. Review web server access logs for successful requests to this endpoint from June 7 onward and treat any hits as confirmed credential exposure. Rotate all API keys, secrets, and OAuth tokens for email service integrations. Amazon SES, Google, Mailjet, Resend, Zoho. Monitor email service accounts for unauthorized sending activity. Sources: Bleeping Computer. 1.2 million WordPress sites, compromised in opt-in monster supply chain attackers, injected malicious JavaScript into Awesome Motive's opt-in monster, Trust Pulse, and push engage WordPress plugin CDN scripts. The payload activates for logged-in administrators, creating rogue administrator accounts and a hidden backdoor plugin. The breach stemmed from a compromised Updraft Plus instance and CDN key. The supply chain attack affected more than 1.2 million WordPress sites. Action: if you use opt-in monster, Trust Pulse, or push engage plugins, audit administrator accounts for unauthorized additions. Review installed plugins for hidden backdoors, particularly those with obfuscated code or unusual file names. Force password resets for all administrator accounts. Update all Awesome Motive plugins to latest versions and verify plugin integrity by comparing file hashes against official repositories. Source: Security Week. Texas Gov data breach exposes over 3 million driver's licenses. Texas Parks and Wildlife Department disclosed a data breach at its license system vendor affecting 3,087,721 Texas hunting and fishing license customers. Texas Cyber Command discovered the intrusion and confirmed that drivers' license information, passport numbers, email addresses, phone numbers, and residential addresses were exposed. Social security numbers, dates of birth, and financial information were not impacted. TPWD is working with the vendor to implement new safeguards and enhanced monitoring, and is offering 1 year of free credit monitoring to affected individuals. Action: if you are a Texas hunting or fishing license customer, monitor credit reports and financial statements for suspicious activity. Consider placing a credit freeze or fraud alert with major credit bureaus. Remain vigilant for phishing and impersonation scams using the exposed personal information. TPWD customers should verify any communication claiming to be from the agency by contacting TPWD directly through official channels. Source: Bleeping Computer. Next section: General Security News. Authorities dismantle FAS network and clean sites infected with SOC-Gaulish coordinated FBI-led action, dismantled Outsider Enterprise, a Chinese phishing-as-a-service operation running since 2023. The syndicate combined AI and distributed phishing kits to impersonate trusted brands across millions of fraudulent SMS messages sent from major U.S. telecom carriers. Investigators attribute $1.9 billion in financial losses and theft of roughly 3.8 million credit card records to the operation. Federal authorities seized multiple administrative servers, a Shopify storefront, a Telegram bot containing customer data, and approximately $100,000 in cryptocurrency. Google disabled thousands of associated domains and filed a civil lawsuit against the infrastructure operators, while coordinating with AT&T, T-Mobile, and Verizon to block fraudulent text messages. Source: SentinelOne. XSS and Spider flaws expose 10 million Chrome users to hacking critical vulnerabilities in Cider AI Spider and Max AI XSS. Agentic side panel Chrome extensions allow malicious websites to trigger arbitrary extension actions, including hidden tab screenshots, AI memory dumps, and potential file access. With over 10 million combined installs and no vendor response, the issues enable full browser session compromise and account takeovers without user interaction. Action: remove Cider AI and Max AI Chrome extensions immediately until vendors issue fixes. Audit browser extensions for similar agentic capabilities that could be triggered by malicious web pages without user interaction. Source: Security Week. 10-year-old PHP BB flaw enables session hijacking. Researchers uncovered a critical authentication bypass in PHP BB versions up to 3.3.16 and 4.0.0a2. A single unauthenticated HTTP request can impersonate any user, including admins, exposing private messages and forum content, and providing full administrative control. PHP BB users should upgrade immediately to 3.3.17 or the latest master branch. Action: upgrade PHP BB installations to version 3.3.17 or later immediately. Review forum logs for suspicious administrative actions and unauthorized access to private messages from recent weeks. Source: Security Week. JetBrains Marketplace plugins steal developer AI keys. At least 15 malicious AI coding assistant plugins published in the JetBrains Marketplace exfiltrate OpenAI, DeepSeek, and similar API keys. The plugins have racked up nearly 70,000 installs while functioning as advertised. Keys are sent to attacker-controlled servers, enabling unauthorized use of developer AI service accounts and potential large-scale API abuse. Action: audit installed JetBrains plugins for unexpected network connections. Rotate all AI service API keys, OpenAI, DeepSeek, etc. If using third-party coding assistant plugins, monitor API usage for unauthorized activity and implement rate limiting on AI service accounts. Source: Security Week. AutoJack attack lets one web page hijack AI agent for host code execution. CVE 2026-25592, CVE 2026-26030. Microsoft researchers detailed an exploit chain named AutoJack that turns an AI browsing agent into a delivery vehicle for remote code execution. The flaw sits in AutoGen Studio, the open-source prototyping interface for Microsoft Research's AutoGen multi-agent framework. The vulnerability was present in two pre-release PyPI builds, 0.4.3, Dev 1 and 0.4.3. Dev 2, that included an unauthenticated MCP WebSocket route accepting commands directly from request parameters. The socket trusted localhost connections, skipped authentication on MCP paths, and ran attacker-supplied commands under the AutoGen Studio process account. A web page rendered by a local browsing agent could execute arbitrary commands on the host. Microsoft reported the behavior to MSRC and maintainers hardened the main branch in commit B047730, but no patched PyPI release exists yet. Action: if you installed AutoGen Studio pre-release versions 0.4.3, Dev 1 or 0.4.3, Dev 2, pull from GitHub main at or after commit B047730. Do not run AutoGen Studio on the same machine as browsing or code execution agents that touch untrusted content. Isolate in separate containers or VMs and run AutoGen Studio under a low-privilege account. A plain pip install AutoGen Studio gives version 0.4.2.2, which has no MCP route and is not affected. Source: The Hacker News. Unpatchable Usplitter 8 exploit breaks Apple A12 and A13 secure ROM boot. Chain security researchers published a working exploit dubbed Usplitter 8 that achieves arbitrary code execution inside the secure ROM of Apple's A12 and A13 chips. The code is burned into silicon at manufacture and cannot be patched via software update. The exploit requires physical possession of the device in DFU mode and connection via USB to a dedicated RP2350-based microcontroller board, completing in under 2 seconds. Affected devices include iPhone XS, XS Max, XR, iPhone 11 series, iPhone SE 2nd Gen, iPad Air 3rd Gen, iPad Mini 5th Gen, iPad 8th Gen, Apple Watch Series 4 and 5, Watch SE 1st Gen, and HomePod Mini. The root issue is a hardware flaw in the Synopsys DWC2 USB controller that creates a repeatable buffer underflow, stepping the right pointer backwards through memory 12 bytes at a time. On A12 and A13, the USB Dart IMU runs in bypass mode, allowing DMA pointer to reach and overwrite arbitrary SRAM. Post-exploitation injects a custom USB request handler and can temporarily demote SoC production mode or boot unsigned iBoot images outside Apple's chain of trust. A11 is not affected. A14 and later appear to configure Dart correctly. Action: this is a physical access attack requiring DFU mode and cannot be remotely exploited. Treat A12/A13 devices as permanently vulnerable to physical forensics and adversarial access. Do not rely on device encryption alone to protect data at rest on these devices if physical access is a threat. Consider upgrading high-value targets to A14 or later devices. For law enforcement and forensics teams, be aware this exploit enables bypassing secure boot on affected devices. Source: The Hacker News. Next section, Patch Priority. Splunk Enterprise Critical Actively Exploited, CVE 2026-20253, CIS-AKEV, Known Exploited Vulnerabilities Catalog, due Sunday, June 21. Upgrade to 10.2.4 or 10.0.7. Fortinet FortiGate Critical, 86,000 devices compromised. Reset all admin and VPN passwords. upgrade to Ford iOS 7.2.11+/7.4.8+/7.6.1+, for PBKDF2 hashing, enable MFA. Gravity SMTP WordPress plugin high severity, active exploitation, CVE 2026-4020. Upgrade to version 2.1.5, rotate all exposed API keys and OAuth tokens. Avada Builder WordPress plugin critical, unauthenticated arbitrary file deletion, CVE 2026-8713. Upgrade to version 3.15.4. Auto Gen Studio critical remote code execution for pre-release users, CVE 2026-25592, CVE 2026-26030. Pull from GitHub main commit B047730 or later. Next section, Vulnerability Disclosures. Avada Builder WordPress plugin, CVE 2026-8713. Critical unauthenticated arbitrary file deletion, flaw effects, Avada Builder WordPress plugin, used on 1 million sites. Attackers can delete arbitrary files on the server through a path traversal flaw, provided a published Avada form is configured to save submissions to the database. Deleting critical files such as wp-config. PHP can revert the site to its initial setup state, leading to full site takeover and remote code execution. Fixed in version 3.15.4. No active exploitation observed yet? Action: upgrade Avada Builder to version 3.15.4 immediately. Review web server logs for path traversal attempts targeting form submission handlers. Verify wp-config. PHP and other critical WordPress files have not been modified or deleted. Source: Bleeping Computer. Microsoft. June 2026 Windows updates break recycle bin, prompts Microsoft, confirmed a bug in June 2026 Windows updates that causes different file names to appear in the confirmation dialog when permanently deleting a file from the recycle bin. The dialog displays the internal recycle bin file name, for example, $rxxxxx, xed instead of the original file name. The issue affects all supported Windows client and server platforms. Microsoft is working on a fix for a future Windows update, with a temporary workaround available for businesses through Microsoft's support for business. Source: Bleeping Computer. Chromium CVEs, CVE 2026-12446, and 7 additional CVEs. See show notes for the full list. Microsoft Security Response Center published corrected CVE, or common vulnerabilities and exposures, titles for multiple Chromium vulnerabilities including insufficient data validation in passwords. CVE 2026-12446. Incorrect security UI and passwords. Use after free and digital credentials. Heap buffer overflow in WebRTC. Insufficient validation of untrusted input in input. Inappropriate implementation in serial. Insufficient policy enforcement in file system access. And race in safe browsing. All are informational changes only with EPSS scores ranging from 0.1 to 0.4, 4th to 32nd percentile, and 7 additional CVEs. See show notes for the full list. Source: MSRC Security Update Guide. Next section, Trends and Context. The 40 Bleed campaign demonstrates a self-sustaining attack model where credential theft and network interception create a feedback loop, enabling continued expansion. This pattern, combined with the gentleman's rapid operationalization of public BYOVD exploits and Dragon Force's abuse of trusted Microsoft Teams infrastructure, shows threat actors optimizing for stealth and persistence by exploiting legitimate services and weak credential practices. The high volume of WordPress plugin supply chain attacks and authentication bypass flaws highlights the persistent risk in third-party integrations and the immediate need for strict authentication controls on all API endpoints. That concludes today's Cyber Threat Brief. From Carolina, Clear Tech. Stay patched, stay vigilant.